Generation X is the generation that nobody talks about. While we endlessly debate boomers, millennials, and Gen Z, there's an entire generation living quietly in the middle, barely noticed by anyone. Generation X, born roughly between 1965 and 1980, are your older co-workers who never complain, your parents who seem a bit detached, and the people who actually built the internet but never post about it. What makes them unique isn't just their age, it's their psychology, which is probably the most misunderstood of any living generation today. To understand Gen X, you have to go back to their childhood. They were the first massive wave of latchkey kids in America. Imagine being 8 years old in 1978, coming home to an empty house because both your parents are working. There's no smartphone to call them, no Ring camera for them to check on you, and no way for anyone to know if you're safe. You let yourself in, make a snack, do your homework alone, and wait. A study found that by 1984, about 7 million children between 5 and 13 were regularly left alone after school. For an entire generation, this became normal. It taught them that you can't always count on someone being there for you. More importantly, it made them understand that actions have real consequences, ones you can't talk your way out of. When Gen X parents finally came home, the rules were strict and immediate. Nobody cared about how the kids felt or wanted to have a long conversation about it. If you stepped out of line, you paid for it right then and there. Psychologists call this a high-contingency environment, where your actions directly led to outcomes without any buffer time. This trained Gen X brains to think 3 steps ahead, to predict what could go wrong, and to plan accordingly. That's why Gen Xers seem to think differently than younger generations. They learned early to see the world in terms of cause and effect. Growing up, Gen X also watched their parents make big promises that didn't come true. They saw their parents talk about stability and security, but then watched divorce rates skyrocket through the 70s and 80s. They watched people work loyally for companies for decades, only to get pink slips when layoffs happened. Everyone told them, work hard, follow the rules, and everything will be fine. But then the rules kept changing. So Gen X developed what psychologists might call defensive pessimism, but they just call it being realistic. They're not cynical, exactly. They've just built up emotional armor. They hope for good things but expect the worst, because honestly, that's what usually happened. This psychology also explains why Gen X is nearly invisible on social media. They grew up when privacy was just normal. When you made a mistake as a kid, maybe a few people knew about it, and that was the end of it. No phones, no videos going viral, just some awkward memories. The idea of posting your entire life for strangers to judge feels risky and dangerous to them. It's not that they don't understand technology, they invented a lot of it. It's that they learned early that the less people know about you, the safer you are. Gen X also grew up during the Cold War, when teachers talked about nuclear war like it was just another possibility. They had duck and cover drills in school, as if hiding under a desk would actually save them. When adults act like everything's about to fall apart, but also tell you not to worry, you learn to hold 2 opposite ideas at the same time. You learn to keep your distance and use humor to protect yourself. Gen X turned irony into a shield. Crack a joke, keep things at arm's length, laugh before it can hurt. Despite all this heaviness, Gen X developed a distinctive approach to work that stands out today. They don't talk about it or post about it on Instagram. They just do it. This work ethic came from jobs that seem almost ancient now. Paper routes at 5 in the morning, bagging groceries, working cash registers where you had to calculate change in your head when the machine broke. These weren't resume builders. They were real introductions to the adult world where a 12-year-old could be responsible for delivering newspapers to an entire neighborhood because they watched their parents get destroyed by corporate restructuring and layoffs. Gen X never believed in company loyalty, but they're fiercely loyal to their own competence. They can't control whether they'll get fired, but they can control whether they're the most valuable person in the room. This is why many Gen Xers have multiple income streams today, not because they're naturally entrepreneurial, but because they learned that nothing lasts forever. Here's something interesting about Gen X psychology. They're simultaneously the most independent and the most quietly collaborative. They'll never ask for help and will figure things out themselves. They've been doing that since they were 8 years old. But if you need help, they'll show up without drama and without posting about it on social media. This comes from forming tight friendships out of necessity when their parents weren't around. Their relationship with authority is complicated. They respect competence and skill, not fancy job titles. If you've earned your position through actual ability, they'll follow you. But if you're just someone with a title who doesn't know what you're doing, they have no patience for you. Gen X questions authority because they watched incompetent leaders make terrible decisions their entire lives, from Watergate to the Iran-Contra scandal to the mishandled AIDS crisis. Gen X has also faced serious economic challenges that hit hard. The youngest Gen Xers graduated college right when the dot-com bubble burst. The oldest ones were hitting their peak when the 2008 financial crisis happened. They've been economically traumatized repeatedly, which is why they're more likely to have backup plans and multiple ways to make money. Research shows that Gen Xers sometimes struggle with self-reliance that borders on anxiety. They're incredibly good at handling crises, but that skill comes from not wanting to depend on anyone else. Studies show that Gen Xers are less likely to ask for help when stressed, not because they don't have people to ask, but because asking feels like admitting defeat. This self-reliance also shaped how they learned. Before the internet, knowledge had weight. Gen X spent hours in libraries looking through card catalogs for a single book that might have the answer they needed. Information required effort and time, so they valued what they learned differently. They learned to fix things with their hands because that's what you did when your bike chain broke or your TV stopped working. You didn't call someone, you figured it out yourself. This built a belief that with patience and the right tools, you could master the physical world. Now Gen X is watching their kids grow up in a completely different world. They gave their children the attention and supervision they never had, but sometimes they worry they've made them too dependent, too visible, because in the Gen X worldview, being visible means being vulnerable. The truth is, Generation X might be the last generation that truly understands what it means to be alone with your thoughts, to be bored, and to solve problems without instantly searching for answers online. They're not better than other generations, just different, shaped by a unique moment in history when the old world was dying and the new one hadn't quite been born yet. They're the bridge generation, connecting two very different worlds. And bridges don't get much attention. They're just there doing the work, holding things together, expecting nothing in return. And maybe that's the most Gen X thing of all, not caring whether anyone notices.